There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from giving too much to the wrong people. You smile when you're tired. You agree when you want to walk away. You stay quiet when something hurts, not because you don't feel it, but because you don't want to be too much. You've been trained to please, to make things easier, to be the one who understands, even when no one's trying to understand you. And slowly, you become a version of yourself that's digestible, safe, predictable, liked by everyone, but truly known by no one, including yourself. What starts as kindness becomes performance. What feels like connection becomes resentment. What looks like strength becomes self-abandonment. And one day, you wake up and realize you've been saying yes to everyone except yourself. This isn't about being selfish. It's about being real. It's about remembering that your peace matters, that your voice matters, that your life was never meant to be lived as someone else's comfort zone. Because the people who love you don't need you to please them. They just need you, honest, whole, and finally, home within yourself. Welcome to Lessons Legacy. There was a time when I thought being liked was the same as being loved. That if I could just be agreeable, easy to talk to, always available, people would stay, people would care, people would choose me. So I tried. I laughed at jokes I didn't find funny, said yes to things I didn't want to do, softened my opinions, diluted my needs, filtered my feelings, all so I wouldn't be too much. I thought I was being kind, but I was really disappearing. Every time I stayed silent to keep the peace, I lost a piece of myself. Every time I prioritized someone else's comfort over my truth, I made myself smaller. Every time I said yes out of fear, I said no to who I really was. And people loved that version of me, the version who never complained, never challenged, never took up too much space. But the truth, they didn't love me, they loved what I did for them. What I realized is this: when you try to be everything for everyone, you become nothing to yourself. People-pleasing isn't love, it's fear dressed up as generosity. And the more you live for their comfort, the more your soul aches for your own. Because deep down, you know this isn't who you were meant to be. You weren't born to shrink. You weren't made to be molded. You were meant to be whole. You become nothing to yourself. People-pleasing isn't love. It's fear dressed up as generosity. And the more you live for their comfort, the more your soul aches for your own. Because deep down, you know this isn't who you were meant to be. You weren't born to shrink. You weren't made to be molded. You were meant to be whole. It didn't start with weakness. It started with survival. Somewhere along the way, you learned that saying yes made things easier, that staying agreeable kept the peace, that being helpful made you feel needed, and being needed felt like love. So you became the fixer, the dependable one, the person everyone turned to, because they knew you wouldn't say no. And you wore that role like a badge of honor. You thought, if I'm useful, I'll be valued. If I'm easy, I'll be loved. If I show up for them, they'll show up for me. But over time, you notice the imbalance. They called when they needed something, but rarely when they just wanted to know how you were. They praised your loyalty, but disappeared the moment you set a boundary. They loved the version of you that gave everything, but flinched when you asked for something in return. That's when you begin to feel it. This isn't connection. This is convenience. You realize your yes wasn't always a choice. It was a reflex, a habit formed from years of thinking your worth came from what you could give. And now you're tired, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, because deep down, you've been negotiating your peace for temporary approval. But approval fades, and what you gave up to get it is starting to cost too much. People see the smile, but they don't see the fear behind it. The fear of being disliked, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being seen as difficult, dramatic, or too much. So you smile, you nod, you go along with things that quietly break you inside, because you're more afraid of conflict than you are of being unhappy. Somewhere along the way, you started believing that peace meant silence, that kindness meant self-erasure, that your role was to absorb discomfort so others could feel comfortable. And it worked for a while. They praised your patience, admired your calm, said, "You're so easy to be around." But what they really meant was, "You never challenge me, you never make me uncomfortable, you don't ask for much." And you started to feel it, that subtle, sick ache of being praised, but never truly seen, of being kind, but constantly overlooked. And the worst part, you told yourself it was your fault, that maybe if you were a little more accommodating, they'd finally notice, finally reciprocate, finally stay. But here's the truth, no amount of pleasing will ever be enough for someone who benefits from your silence. You don't need to be easier to love. You need to stop handing your peace to people who only love the parts of you that never say no. Most people think burnout comes from doing too much, but sometimes it comes from caring too much, giving too much, saying yes too much. You don't collapse because of one big moment. You unravel slowly, over weeks, months, years. One unspoken frustration at a time, one boundary crossed, one favor agreed to, in your soul whispered, "No." You go through the motions, smiling while your chest gets heavier, helping while your energy disappears, showing up for others while quietly disappearing from yourself. And the world keeps applauding you. You're so dependable, you're always there, you never complain. But deep inside, you are screaming for space, for rest, for someone, anyone to see the weight you're carrying behind that calm expression. You lie in bed, replaying conversations, wondering if you did enough, if you said too much, if you came off the wrong way. You live in your head because it feels safer than being real. That is the quiet burnout, Not physical exhaustion, but emotional depletion. The kind of tired that sleep can fix. And one day, you finally ask, "What about me?" That's not selfish, that's survival. You were never meant to be the emotional oxygen tank for people who refuse to breathe on their own. One of the hardest things you'll ever do is start saying no, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. Because you finally realize you've been saying yes to everyone else's needs, and maybe later to your own. You've been the bridge, but no one asked if you were breaking beneath their footsteps. So now, you pause, you think before you agree, you stop over-explaining, and simply say, "I can't do that right now." At first, it feels wrong. You expect backlash. You feel guilty, like you're letting people down. But slowly, you notice something different. You feel lighter, calmer, more rooted in yourself. Because boundaries aren't walls, they're windows. They let the right people in and keep the chaos out. And here's what surprises you. The people who truly love you, they don't need all access passes. They don't flinch when you say, "Not today." They don't need you exhausted to feel connected. They just want you, present, honest, whole. And the rest, the ones who get angry when you stop overgiving, they were never with you to begin with. They were with your compliance. You don't owe anyone unlimited access, especially if the cost is yourself. You weren't born a people pleaser. You were trained to be one. Trained to read the room before you read yourself, to anticipate needs before expressing your own, to measure your worth in how easy you made things for others. Maybe it started in childhood. Maybe you learned it that being good meant being quiet, that love had conditions, that saying no came with consequences. So you got good at shrinking, at adapting, at saying what was expected, not what was true, and it worked for a while. You became the easy one, the helper, the strong one, the one who never caused a scene. But now, you're tired of being small. You're tired of being the one who understands, but rarely feels understood. Tired of giving so much grace to others, while offering none to yourself. Because here's the truth. You can't keep sacrificing your wholeness for a version of peace that only works for everyone else. You were never meant to feed inside other people's expectations. You were meant to live in truth, even if it shakes the room. It's okay to outgrow the training, to unlearn the patterns, to disappoint people who only loved your compliance. That's not rebellion, that's remembrance. You're not too much, you were just never meant to be this small. There comes a moment when you stop waiting for others to choose you, and you finally choose yourself. Not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but out of the quiet realization that no one else can give you what you've been denying yourself. You stop texting first just to keep the connection alive. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop over-explaining your no, and start standing by it without guilt. And when you do, some people disappear, not because you changed, but because you stopped shrinking to make them feel secure. And yes, it stings. Yes, it's lonely at first, but something else begins to grow in that space. Peace. The kind of peace that comes when your time, your energy, and your boundaries are finally aligned with your truth. You realize you don't need to be liked by everyone. You don't need to explain your choices to people who never cared to understand them. You don't need to exhaust yourself trying to keep people comfortable. And choosing yourself doesn't mean pushing others away. It means no longer abandoning the one person who's been with you through everything. This is not the path of ego. It's the path of return, of remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. At some point, you stop trying to explain your boundaries. You stop defending your decisions. You stop softening the edges of your truth just to make others feel more comfortable. Because you realize your softness is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. You've spent years managing other people's emotions, tiptoeing around their reactions, absorbing their projections, all to avoid the discomfort of being misunderstood. But not anymore. Now, you honor silence. Now, you trust the pause before a yes. Now, you let people feel whatever they need to feel without carrying the weight of it. And something beautiful happens. You become less reactive, less desperate for approval, less addicted to being needed. You start valuing peace over performance, solitude over superficial connection, and authenticity over acceptance. People might say you've changed, that you're not as sweet as you used to be, that you're distant, colder, different. But the truth is, you're not colder. You're just no longer setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. This is what healing looks like. Fewer explanations, firmer boundaries, and a deeper, quieter kind of love for yourself. You were never meant to be everything for everyone. You were meant to be whole, present, and at peace. And the ones who truly see you will never ask you to trade your soul for their comfort. You don't have to say yes to be kind. You don't have to explain yourself to be understood. You don't have to be soft for people who only love you when you're silent. You're allowed to set boundaries, to protect your energy, to say no without a reason. Because your worth doesn't come from how much you tolerate. It comes from how deeply you honor yourself. People-pleasing might have kept you safe once, but it's not who you are. You're not here to be easy. You're here to be real. To speak what's true, to live what's honest. And yes, you might lose a few people when you stop overgiving, but you'll find yourself, and that's a trade worth making. From now on, you don't have to chase love through compliance. You don't have to prove your value through sacrifice. You just have to come home to your truth again and again until it no longer feels like rebellion, but like return. protect your peace, not their comfort. You don't owe anyone your silence. You owe yourself your life. Welcome back to your voice. Welcome back to your boundaries. Welcome back to you.